Hello and welcome to the Political Opinions podcast, where every opinion is given equal footing and political tolerance and debate are given their proper attention in a world where both are on the decline. Today's episode will cover different opinions on hosting the Olympic Games. It's fair to say that in recent years, the Olympics has been going through a tough time, coming from various controversies with the 2016 Rio Olympics to the delays with the Tokyo Olympics, thanks COVID. It is therefore easy to look back on earlier Olympics with a high degree of positivity in relation to more recent ones, as we only remember the aspects that went well. What many people may not be aware of, however, is that the very act of hosting the Olympics is controversial, with a number of drawbacks impacting every host city. Despite these drawbacks, however, many are still keen on hosting the Olympics and point to the positives of doing so. Today we will unpick and compare these opinions. When thinking of Olympic preparation, it is easy to just look at the massive amount of construction required for the Games. Now sure, a lot goes into creating sporting venues, you need them at the end of the day. What is often forgotten, however, is that this is almost always accompanied with wider industrial development projects. For example, the preparations in the London 2012 Games were the start of a massive redevelopment project for the City of London. This has led to many forgotten and often derelict parts of the city being revitalised and renewed. Such a degree of development is almost always a positive over time, with more sports venues alongside new infrastructure and citywide redevelopment. Now, not only can the Olympics lead to a population getting to experience a developed city, but it can also be a source of pride for the host city. At the end of the day, who wouldn't be proud of hosting something as prestigious as the Olympic Games? The opening ceremony is a chance to show the best of your country's history, and so long as the water doesn't turn green, the Olympics is something for all the population to be proud of. Speaking of green, let's annoy some environmentalists with a lovely point involving lots and lots of plane travel. The Olympics, assuming you aren't Tokyo, is perhaps the best source of tourism generation a city can ultimately experience. And no other event can bring people in from as many different countries at once. All of this boosts the tourism industry, as well as brings more money into the local economy. Alongside redevelopment projects, therefore, this could lead to more tourism long term and again benefit the whole city, potentially the whole country, economically. A reason for this boost in tourism is the potential for the Olympics to boost the reputation of the host city. While some hosts may have to build walls to hide the bits no one wants to see, the mood surrounding the Olympics is commonly positive and allows people to focus in on good elements of a city. Every city has good and bad, some more than others, but the ability to promote the good on the world stage is never really a bad thing, and again the opening ceremony and the whole kind of mood, if you will, around the Olympics helps with this. Now all of this ultimately climaxes in the true aim of most Olympic bids, a positive economic impact. With development, job creation alongside it as well as tourism, the Olympics can be a source of a massive influx of money into an economy. Most host cities aim to make profit in the Olympics, meaning costs can be covered, and the long-term economic situation of a city can hopefully benefit greatly. Now this final point is a bit out there, but a valid case can also be made that there is no better time to win medals at an Olympics than when you are the host. For countries that rarely do so well, and even countries which do, hosting an Olympics is a great opportunity to assist your athletes in winning medals. And after all, who doesn't love the bragging rights of winning more medals than neighbouring countries? For some, this alone may be worth it all. Let's start with a nice big number. 428 million. That £428 million alone was spent on building the Beijing National Stadium, also known as the Bird's Nest because it looks like a bird's nest, I guess. That stadium today is often scarcely used, and in some cases may be seen as derelict. A similar situation has occurred with almost all of the Olympic infrastructure in Rio. Such a large amount of infrastructure for the Olympics is rarely, if ever, used again. Half a decade preparing for just over 2 weeks of games, and then it's gone. While certain infrastructure is almost always good for a city, much of the Olympic construction is not useful long term. You're not going to be constantly using all of the sports infrastructure, and Olympic villages and other areas alongside that are often found essentially abandoned, warranting the question, is it all worth it? Now, while many may believe that a host city's population should be proud of hosting an Olympics, not everyone feels that way. I doubt the 1.5 million Beijing inhabitants evicted for the 2008 Games, nor the tens of thousands of people hidden behind a wall in Rio would say the Olympics was good for them. Even those not directly displaced or impacted, the rest of the population have their everyday lives interrupted by years of construction and development, all for 2 weeks. Now, unless you work in the tourism industry or have the development positively affect you, many people may find the Games a hindrance more than a point of pride. Now, at this point I'm sensing a common theme. The words 2 weeks keep coming up. Annoyingly for those supporting the Olympics, they aren't done just yet. They're back for tourism. What we commonly find when looking at host city tourism is that it is contingent on the Games, not the city itself. If the city is the sort of place you don't want to go on holiday, when the Olympic Games are over, you're not going to go on holiday there. I don't know about you, but I'm not so eager to go to a city where I could be crudely arrested, kidnapped, robbed and so on, just because an Olympics at one point or other occurred there. Every city has had a great moment, but that doesn't change what a city today might ultimately be. A reason for this lack of tourism long term could also be the reputation a Games obtains. While Olympic fever runs high during the actual time of the Games, the area either side is not really so good. Be it costs running greatly over budget, human rights concerns, issues with organising committees and so on. World focus on the host city means that just as the good comes out, so too does the bad. To take an extreme example, the 1976 Munich Olympic Games are remembered for one thing and one thing only, and that's not the sort of reputation that screams, let's go on holiday there. With all of these benefits doubted by some, there is an area that cannot be doubted by anyone, and that is, it is very expensive to host the Games, surprisingly. The average cost often runs into the tens of billions, and that's a lot for a potential impact, not a guaranteed one. Both Rio and Tokyo have failed to see economic benefits arise from the great cost of hosting the Olympics. Now, admittedly, both were dealing with external issues like COVID and the Zika virus, but it still supports the view held by some that the immense cost, both financial and other, is not always worth it, and could cause more economic harm than good. Just ask Greece. To say, therefore, that it's all worth it in order to win more medals, to some might be seen as a bit tone deaf. Winning medals is likely when you're hosting the Olympics, but not always guaranteed, as England found out recently. And is it really worth winning a few more gold medals for the small cost of a few billion pounds, or dollars, whatever currency you're using? To some, this answer is a very, very strong no. Time for the bit I know you all came for, and that is the comparison. On the first point of city development, some believe that preparing for an Olympic Games leads to a developed city as a whole, beyond sports venues with wider infrastructure and redevelopment. However, those disagreeing would say much of the infrastructure used in the Olympics is never used again, and not all infrastructure and development is useful if it's abandoned at the end of the day. On this impact to the host city population, some believe the Olympic Games are a source of pride for the population, and it makes people feel proud and united around their city. However, others believe that the Olympic Games can cause many problems for a host city population. Many people find themselves displaced, and everyday life is almost always interrupted. On the environmentalist joy, tourism, some believe that the Olympics is a huge boost to tourism within a host city. This brings in money and can cause long-term tourism trends to change. However, others believe that tourism is not long-lasting and doesn't cover the cost, essentially, in the long run. Many people go to cities for the games, not the city itself. On this question of how was the reputation of a city impacted, some believe the very act of hosting the Olympics enhances a city's reputation. It puts the city on a global stage in a positive manner. However, others believe the Olympics don't always enhance the reputation in the way you want, and global focus could instead be tarnished with many controversies, to say the least. On this question of the economic impact, those supporting the Olympics believe there are positive economic impacts, with tourism, investment and job creation all being positive things, impacting and helping to grow the local economy. However, others believe the long-term economic impact may actually be more harmful. The immense financial cost is often not always made back, or even made nearly back in many cases, and can cause debt and other economic problems to rise. And finally, on this weird point of Olympic performance, some believe hosting the games improves your performance as the host city or host country, and having lots of support leads to more medals, which is a good thing. However, others believe winning more medals is not always guaranteed, and it should not be the focus of such an extensive and expensive project. Overall, the Olympics is not always a guaranteed success. While in many cases it may lead to city redevelopment and boost the long-term reputation and economy of the host city, it may also be a loss of money down the drain for very little in return. It does appear that this topic should be assessed case by case. For example, the London Games are commonly seen as a success by many in the UK, while nearly, or in some polls over half of people in Tokyo, opposed the Games before it even began. With no slowdown in the eagerness of cities to host the Olympics, however, it is interesting to see how the future of the Olympic Games shapes out. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Let me know in the comments or on Twitter. Be sure to check back on Monday for another episode. Thank you all once more for listening, and I hope to see you soon.